our panelists. Thanks, Wade. So we are going to be recording this. So if you do not want to be recorded, just I think it's a webinar, so we can't really see anyone's faces or anything anyway, but just letting you know that. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining our discussion. As mentioned, feel free to present yourself in the chat, indicate where you're calling from. My name is Marissa. I am one of the two co-executive directors at Food Secure Canada, and I'm calling in today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Lheidli T'enneh. I'm just going to be doing a little teeny tiny bit of housekeeping before I pass it on to our moderator, Larry. So minor technical stuff, please remain muted throughout the presentations, but if you do want to participate in the chat, that is ideal. If you are having any technical issues or challenges hearing, just message one of us in the chat and we'd be happy to help as well. Je vais faire en français aussi cette interprétation sur la... Oh. I can hear Juliette. I don't know if she's in the interpretation room. She is? Still? Keep talking? Okay, good. Cette présentation sera interprétée, donc pour ceux désirant l'écouter en français, veuillez appuyer sur le bouton en bas sous forme de globe et cliquer sur français. Also, the panelist presentations will be included in the chat in French and English? Just English. I think just both. Wow, look at us. Okay, so today we're really excited to be joined by many panelists and speakers, but our moderator is Larry McDermott, the Executive Director at Plenty Canada and long-term member of the Food Secure Canada Board. Larry's going to be opening the webinar for us and moderating today. Thanks for being here, Larry, and please go ahead. Sorry, Larry, you are muted.
Okay, there we go. Works a lot better, right? Quick, what I'm seeing additional costs, Makwandodam, Shabata Bajram, Indigba, Chimigwech, Mashomaskizis, Kokomaskizis, Janeway Degna. Thank you all for coming and joining this webinar and for the opportunity to share with one another. In today's webinar, we hope to provide a platform to showcase Indigenous-led initiatives, promote knowledge exchange, and discuss the importance of community-driven efforts in restoring and sustaining traditional food systems, and examine how these initiatives contribute to broader goals of food sovereignty and cultural preservation. Guiding us will be Brooke Rice, Jacob Beaton, and Francine Doucet. And in the interest of moving right along, I'm going to pass it off to Brooke Rice. Brooke? Oh, I guess I'm supposed to introduce you. Yes, I apologize, Brooke. Our first panelist is Brooke Rice, who is a Snipe clan of the Qajuqturvik Nation, born and raised in Qajuqturvik. She is an Annie daughter, granddaughter, sister, and relative. She is the co-founder of Nios, It Grows, a grassroots initiative birthed to rekindle our connection to self, land, and others through Haudenosaunee land-based learning and food sovereignty. Her dream is to create a sustainable agri-food hub within the Qajuqturvik community for generations to come. Being an energetic Snipe, she loves hanging out with her family and friends, eating scrumptious foods, foraging, learning about sustainable energy, planting, seed saving, and hunting with her honey. Thanks for being here, Brooke.
Sego everyone, Sego Sawakwego. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, can I share my screen? Yes, I can. Amazing. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up? Okay. So Super excited to be here and honored to have the invite. I got all excited and happy hearing my intro. I was like, wow, I'm a busy gal. So Tkanios, let me introduce myself before I jump into that. Seguzo Guego, Qajuqturvik Sujat, Wakenesio ni Qajuqturvik Dano Kanya Kahagani Ganagara. All my English names are Ray, Sky, Brooke Rice, and my Kanya name means she gathers the flowers, which is pretty fitting these days because I'm foraging everything and saving seeds and picking flowers and frolicking in the fields. I'm Snipe Clan, and I was born and raised in Qajuqturvik, and I've currently seen 35 winters. This is a little image and visual of where I reside along the St. Lawrence River. It's cool to see this visual. I always get reminded of the land stewardship we have as Ungwehue people, that we keep the trees and the green alive, and you could see Montreal right across the way. It's pretty developed and gray. I really like including those visuals. So a part of my journey into Tkanios, which means it grows in our language, was coming back to myself, an act of remembrance. I don't really like the resurgence words and revitalization. I really like to highlight remembering. And through this remembering, it was really meeting different elders and connecting with other seed keepers along my journey and eating our traditional foods. And through eating our traditional foods, it ignited this ancestral memory in myself. And then I found I was really more curious and hungry to know more knowledge. And I sat with as many elders as I could, knowledge keepers, medicine women, seed keepers. And that's also fitting for my Snipe clan. It's a little busy bird that's just in like everyone's business, and I'm very community oriented. So amongst my journey, and I graduated from the immersion program in Qajuqturvik. It's a 2-year language immersion program where we learn our language, and a part of the curriculum is going to ceremony and attending our cycle of ceremony that follow the lunar calendar. And through the language learning, I was able to really participate in ceremony, understanding what they were saying. And it really was profound awakening, awareness, this like consciousness in me. Just like reignited that fire inside, and this excitement of like, wow, our whole existence of who we are is all based on food, how we're storing it, how we're harvesting it, how we're collecting it, and being able to have food for the whole winter for a good 3 to 4 years. Like we were just storing food. So as I was learning the language, I was connecting our months to each moon, and it's all connected to the land. And if we observe the land, we see when the leaves are changing, and that's occurring right now. We see when there's the duality of the winter, the cooler air and the warmer air. Like right now they're fighting each other, and that's one of the stories I learned. And we're coming into that, well, we pretty much passed the fall equinox, we're moving into the cold. But I just found it really beautiful to see it connected into our language. And then a deeper dive, I seen the turtle's back, and it's a significant element in our creation story, and in our ceremony they sing Ostowagoa, and they bring in a turtle rattle, a snapping turtle. And as we look to the turtle's back, there's 28 of these scoots, and then there's 13 shells. And that represents our traditional calendar. If we look at the moons, the new moon, we have 13 moons. We see that some of our months have 2 moons, but this Gregorian Western calendar pushed on the 12-month ideology on us. So I'm really like backtracking, but also trying to bring it into this modern time. And it connected to all our cycles of ceremonies that we do. Our next ceremony would be right here, the harvest. We call it Qajuqturvik. It's what we're harvesting in our gardens. And just really cool. So I did this for school. I created this like interactive, how do we learn during the pandemic? And you can literally click on these little triangles, and it would bring you to a YouTube learning or songs where people were singing the actual songs that we would use in ceremony. It was really interesting. And yeah, I took another deep dive further into connecting creation story to all of these teachings that I was harvesting and gathering and putting in my bundle. And as I kept learning and learning, everything just started to connect and piece together, from our seed songs that Sky Woman brings as she falls down to the turtle's back. And the creation story connects the Grandmother Moon teaching to the woman's body of our 28 cycle, how our body, our womb and our womanhood is connected to Grandma Moon, connected to our phases of how we plant, when we're planting, what we're putting in the earth, when we're harvesting. And that's also connected to the star teachings of Pleiades, and just so much cool stuff that I've been loving and enjoying along this way. So through that, I say I'm the co-founder of Tkanios because the other founders were a bunch of badass Haudenosaunee women in my community. We were kind of illegally gathering during pandemic because we weren't supposed to gather. But as women and matriarchs and the matrilineal society, we were trying to find a way to work together. And I just sat and observed, and I wanted to hear what the elder women were saying. And a lot of their concerns were food. There was a food shortage in the grocery stores. There was issues about how we were taking care of our health, whether we were using natural medicines. So these concerns really struck out to me, that we can't even feed ourselves. We don't even have enough food to feed ourselves. And the grocery stores, these shelves were pretty empty, mighty bleak. And then I embarked on a journey into a 4-day fast. No food, no water. And a lot of the messages and the downloads were about seeds and the climate changing. And I just put all these things together and I said, okay, if no one's going to act on this, I'm going to act, and I'm going to bring people with me, and I'm going to listen to what the elders said. And that's just who I am. I'm like a doer. I'm very action oriented. And at Shift, at the university I attend, social innovation, it's a long acronym, Social Innovative Justice Department, where they fund grassroots initiatives. So we applied and we got a small grant, and we were able to do different workshops, different community engagements. So right now, Tkanios is just operating on a chunk of community land that isn't designated to us. There's an issue with like ban system, traditional governance. So we were just doing it. The idea of Tkanios is to remediate land through our seed songs, through planting our seeds. Like every seed is a prayer, and it's bringing connection, kinship. It's bringing community together in these spaces, and we're learning our stories. We're learning our seed songs at the Longhouse. This was a vision I had in 2021. It was cold and snowy, and I looked out the window one morning having coffee, and I saw a big cornfield with a woman, but she had a cradle board on her back, kind of like my people were. But she's Inuk, and she's with a man from my community, and they have a beautiful Inuk Kanyakahaga baby. But this was kind of the image, a cornfield with a baby strapped onto her mother. And some of this work is really like spiritual, and it's a lot of heart work, and we just keep doing it. We get resistance with like, the land isn't designated, and sometimes there's no funding, but we just make it work. And I find there's so much beauty in this. And this is a harvest of a Tuscarora corn. It's famous because they're like a good 1.5 to 2 feet long. And all of our events, we provide traditional meals, whether this food was harvested locally, traded, bartered with other communities, as an act of our remembering intertribal food commerce and our ancestral trade routes. I was fortunate enough to go to Oklahoma and learn from a well-known potter, and I brought 2 youth with me as a mentorship. So now we're able to cook traditionally in our traditional pots, and the food tastes so much better. If you ever get a chance, please do so. Here's a picture of our community plant day. And it really brings people together in the community. We have a community of maybe 9,000, but it brings people of all walks of life that would never cross paths, you know, based on like the age difference, or if they're interested in more sports, or it, like, regardless of the upbringing, religious beliefs, like we came together for the same purpose of planting and putting our seeds into Mother Earth to ensure that we have these seeds acclimated to what's happening in the climate, and just to be able to keep sharing those seeds. Another part of it is a lot of land-based learning through each cycle of the moon phases. So around hunting time, we were able to harvest a beautiful bull in the Mi'kmaq, I believe it was New Brunswick and Quebec territory, along that border. And we did a pop-up moose hide tanning. And we had the kids come from Godianoha. It's our elementary school in the community. And it was a good time. Some of them liked it. Some of them were like, ew, and icky. And some were just raging and roaring and telling their dads to be hunters. And it was a good time. And then we had our language immersion program students come out, which was also nice because they were scraping and working the hides, speaking all in Qajuqturvik. So there's so many elements of language revitalization, culture, all kind of goodies. This was a slash and burn. We're trying to include traditional methods of Haudenosaunee agriculture. We invited a well-known seed keeper, Angie Ferguson, to come and guide us. And that was a good time. Good times. Oh no, it looks blurry. This is us at our greenhouse. So this year for Tkanios, we were really focused on seed saving and just learning. Like, we never operated a greenhouse. That's the beauty of this initiative, is really we're here to learn, we're here to grow. That's why it's called Tkanios. It grows. We're growing relationships, food, social economy, knowledge, growth. And it's funny, we all, at this moment, as we were planting our seedlings in this greenhouse that was lent to us for the season as like a pilot project, we all start talking about our sobriety journeys and how many years we were on, or months. And it just was beautiful to know that our people are healing. And sometimes it's through the land, it's through the plants, it's through these relationships. And it's been a great success. We didn't know what we were doing. We did the thing. We got to practice water irrigation, trellising, hand pollinating. That was fun. We hand pollinated 800-year-old squash. We did a Buffalo Creek variety, which is massive. I'm actually going to show you because it's not going to fit in a picture. Okay. This is a monster. It's a Buffalo Creek. It's literally like 35 pounds. And we grew, I think, 10. Oh my God. So one of our elders had said at a Haudenosaunee seed gathering that these boar no, that's the bug. A vine borer was attacking all the squash, and their best success was in a greenhouse. And it was amazing. So we have all these squash, and we have to do something with them. Practice of food preserving methods. And yeah, through all of this, we've been doing food giveaways, pop-up style, trading, bartering, donating. This is our baby medicine. It's Yodizayantos. It's I think safflower in English, and it's given to our babies. But yeah, this is really just practicing. We had a young youth mentor that joined us from the survival school. She reached out. She's like, I want to learn, and we're super excited to have her. Here's us at a event at the high school. We were trying to get young minds involved and just tickle their interest with the seeds and all the beautiful things that we do. We had walleye fish skin here. We go spearing fish, and nothing goes to waste. Everything's like ecological cradle to grave. We're using everything. We take the fish skin and we turn it into leather. So then our artists can use to make earring backings or medicine pouches, moccasins. We use our corn husk dolls here. We save all our husks to make dolls. We have maple, we do maple tapping. We get busy. We like get so busy we don't have time to do admin stuff and look for grants, and it's just operating on love at this moment. Here we did a medicine walk and foraging. We went look for fiddleheads. We went look for ramps, wild onions. So it's really just teaching people that we're supposed to be ingesting seasonally, locally. There's so much benefits by eating with the seasons, and it's really grounding. Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. But what we did notice is as we're doing these land-based learnings, the seasons are getting closer. So we're tapping the trees a week earlier, we're spearing a week earlier, we're putting the seeds in earlier. Like we're seeing the shift in climate change, and pretty frightening, but hopefully collectively we can plant plants that will remediate and carbon question. This was our Haudenosaunee seed gathering. And at the end of the event, well, the real idea is to pull in all seed savers, seed planters, land learners. We pull everyone together and talk about what we're doing. How are we going to be food sovereign? How are we food secure? How are we going to barter nation to nation, community to community? And then at the end, we have the best trading. Literally no money. It's what you've made, what you've grown, what came from the earth. So we have like beaver pelts, all different root medicines, barks, seeds, baskets, pottery. It's a good time. And all these are Haudenosaunee seeds that have been passed down for many generations. Some have been found in clay pots in archaeological digs, and they're still being grown. And during one of these events, we've heard that there's a huge seed bank in Missouri, and Bayer is part owner, or they bought it off Monsanto. And one of our elders had went, and they said there's a section where there's a lot of our ancestral corn, and in the middle is all stripped. That's where we keep our seed, in the middle part. And there's a tag on it from which Indian agent took it, which year it was taken, and which community or village it belonged to, and they're like locked away. So our seed saver women, they said it felt like how the residential school feeling felt, that all these babies and seeds were just left untouched, forgotten, stored, locked away. So that's one of the needs and urgent matters that our communities are facing. We need to build infrastructure and seed banks to hold these seeds, because they're in motion of remediating all those seeds back to the communities. So that's one of our missions, is to get that going. And here are just some other nice pictures of the land we're operating. We really always want babies there. Intergenerational knowledge transference is a big element of what we do. And here's our harvest. This was just last week, our big squash babies and sunflowers. We have bees in the far corner. There's a lot of deer tracks, so our guys will be out hunting soon. In preparation for our community fall fest, where we bring in, we might bring Chef Tanya Brandt from Six Nations. She always cooks over the fire, and then we have hide scraping. We cook in the pottery at the same time, and we'll have gastoa making, just really like hands-on community event, eating our foods. And there's a cool picture of me butchering a moose. Yeah, I just feel it's really important for our ancestral seeds to help us remember our role in this journey. And I think that's it. Oh no, here's the dream. This is the dream that we want to build. We want to build a huge infrastructure to house all of this, to have a walk-in freezer for our hunters, a corn processing unit where we wash our corn in ashes and store the seeds, have a huge barn style so we can hang our corn to dry, and just a whole community collective space where we can cook together. Because a lot of people say, yes, I can grow this food. I have a garden, but I have no idea how to grow it. And that's what we want to be able to do, is to create this space. So I'm constantly searching for grants and writing and manifesting this for our community. And yeah, here's just some renderings of cute little, it's very cute. It's very small, limited. I'm hoping to get like an architect to do a 3D rendering and bring it to life. But it's our medicine garden, a healing space, the central fire, where we can learn to grow our own medicines, make salves, tinctures, just be real. I don't like self-sufficient, but like collective sufficient. And we're learning our gifts and getting back to the land and taking care of one another as we used to. And we still do, just not the way we used to. So we're gonna get back to that. I think that's all I have. Am I good on time? I was trying to keep that 25 minutes. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, if you want to follow us on Instagram, I'll post all that in the chat. Yeah.
Big wedge. Thank you, Brooke. Any questions?
We do
Okay,
also have a bunch of question time at the end, so if folks want to put their questions in the chat, we'll collect them.
that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Move on to our next speaker. Jacob Beaton is an award-winning Indigenous entrepreneur and leader with a wealth of business success under his belt. Jacob currently leads Tea Creek, an innovative, holistic, and award-winning Indigenous-led, land-based, and culturally safe Indigenous food sovereignty training center. Thanks, Jacob, and over to you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jacob. That's my colonial name. My traditional name is Qajuqturvik. It means busy eagle who gets things done right away. And I'm Tsimshan Haida Heltzik on my First Nations side, all from the west coast of Turtle Island, and English and Scottish ancestry on both sides of my family as well. I just wanted to thank Brooke. That was so inspiring, and just feeling it's so funny, like in the colonial constructs we're separated out, but just watching and listening, I like felt not alone, because we feel so much like alone, or we're told we're separate, right? Like because we're in BC and you're in Ontario or whatever, and it's ridiculous because we actually have so many more ties. And that's actually I edited my presentation because of that a little bit while you were presenting, Brooke, because I got something to share that's really cool, raises the ancestor bumps, the goosebumps when I talk about it. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Bear with me for a second. I'm not going to go through all my slides. I'm going to do a little show and tell, and some of the slides I'm going to show and some I'll skip over. But firstly, our location. So we're in Gitxsan territory. I'm not Gitxsan. We're actually a really special spot. I grew up here because my dad was a teacher here. And as a kid, we were called like the Okanagan, which is a major growing region down south, vineyards and stuff. We were called the Okanagan of the North. And we have this really special valley that has a coastal ecosystem. So all the cedars and hemlocks and coastal berries and things grow here. And then we also have the interior boreal, like the pine spruce forest that go all the way to the east coast. That all grows here. And then we also have the Arctic zone touches us as well. So we have all these Arctic species that don't grow any further east, west, or south of us. And it's all right here in this valley. Super, super diverse. And a really special place to be involved in food. And we're not too hard to get to. People think, oh, you're really remote, but we're only an hour outside of Terrace. So it's pretty quick and easy if you're coming through a major airport like Calgary or Vancouver. Our vision here at Tea Creek, this is it. It's resilient Indigenous economies based on abundant food. And I just like to summarize that by saying our past is our future. So all First Nations were abundant in food, you know, like the myth that we were went hungry is just that. It's a myth, and it's actually a colonial construct that was created from all the traumas of colonization. But when we look back and we kind of rewind the clock a little bit, what we see is that Indigenous First Nations people specifically were the major food producers and fed the colonizers, for a long time. Like here on the West Coast, I mean, First Nations food economies were abundant and incredibly wealthy right up until the 1950s, and were systematically destroyed. So what our reality is here on this side of the world is that all the farms, ranches, almost entirely fishing businesses, food-based businesses were actually First Nations. And this story here where First Nations owned, it says at the bottom, the farmers were Indians. That was our reality here. Is there was documented when the first surveyors showed up, they advertised to the world that there were over 2 million acres of farmland here between the West Coast and what's now Vanderhoof, Burns Lake, Fraser Lake, and closer to Prince George. And guess what? Almost all those 2 million acres are gone. They've now turned to forest. So that photo of the burning, that's what First Nations here used to do, and they used to maintain these massive grasslands that aren't here anymore. The main species of animals that were stewarded here were elk, deer, and caribou, all of whom are extinct or nearly extinct in our area. Because settlers actually brought the forests. They actually moved away from land stewardship, took farms and ranches, turnkey operations with the help of Indian agents and police, and kind of erased from history that First Nations here were very profitable, very successful agriculturists. So there's a documentary coming out on Tea Creek nationally, October 11th, and we do tell this story in that documentary, and it'll be on CBC Gem, so it's free to watch, and I invite everyone to check it out. Another thing I just wanted to talk really quickly about is, and I heard it mentioned in the previous presentation, is language. It really frustrates me that we're speaking English because and French, because these are colonial languages, and so much meaning has not only been lost, I find, in English, but also the words and vocabularies have changed over time to demean and diminish First Nations contributions and historical fact and reality when it comes to food. So one of the stories I have really quickly here is the word chief in English to refer to a First Nations leader is an incredibly recent word that was first used in Canada in the 1790s, the first written use of the word chief. So then my question was, well, what did English speakers call a First Nations leader prior to the word chief? Well, you can see in the photos here, Queen Johnny, Lady Cock, a Crow King. Turns out the words we used were king, queen, lord, lady. And so to try and imagine the colonial mind, if you're referring to a First Nations leader as a king or queen versus, or a lord or a lady versus chief. And why did that change? Well, of course, especially, in the East, or our First Nations friends there, well, they were allies and they were seen as equals for a very long time, for hundreds of years. And it's really just been in the 1800s with these broken treaties, full-on land theft, and the diminishing of First Nations food production and stewardship of lands that we've started to use this word chief. And so I've started to question now when I'm speaking English and talking about our culture, like, okay, how has this diminished us, and what is the actual fact? What words were used in our language for soil, for example, or for plants, and how, because for us, plants and soil were not separate. They were a part of us. And we find that in a lot of First Nations matrilineal cultures here, where the relationship with plants, soil, animals was that of kin and kinship, and taking care of each other. They were not separate from us. So yeah, in the Coast Salish language, the word for people and for land has the same root word, and that root word means center of our being. So how does that change our perceptions of land and food if it's the center of our being? I often when I'm talking to non-First Nations, I have to explain that food security and food sovereignty aren't the same thing. Food security is a goal. We're to always have enough food, and it's an incredibly critical goal for us because currently in BC, anyways, I know the data from this province is that over half of First Nations children are food insecure. They can't count on food every day. Food sovereignty is how we get to food security. How do we ensure that we always have enough food? And food sovereignty is about knowledge transfer, being allowed to teach your own people and pass on that knowledge and not have it disrupted. It's about land back, getting back to our land and having full access to our territories. It's about controlling our own laws around our own food. It's policy. So it's so much more than you can't interchange them. And I'm just going to say that because we run into this a lot when it comes to grant writing and fundraising, that non-First Nations are like, oh, food sovereignty is the new sexy word. Let's just like switch it. Let's take a food security program or initiative or technology and call it food sovereignty, and they're not interchangeable. Sovereignty is a distinctly First Nations Indigenous way of thinking about our economies, cultures, lands, and foods. And it's an internationally accepted definition that was driven by Indigenous peoples from South America and Africa, and has kind of expanded around the world. Okay, I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. There's some things that I've come across that you might find interesting. You might have seen this data point. 80% of the world's biodiversity, according to United Nations and the latest COPE conferences, are being carried and held by Indigenous peoples globally, but we have less than 1% of the world's resources. So basically, Indigenous peoples are doing the work of the planet right now in terms of saving us, but with no money. And then Canada's losing food producers at the rate of nearly 10 per day. And so the solution they're looking at is, hey, let's bring in 30,000 people from other countries to be farmers. I'm like, what about us? Like, we were farmers. We have this young growing population that wants to produce food. 25 times more paperwork. So this is a very large foundation. I won't name them because I'm so grateful they gave me this information, but they did an audit of granting programs. And they said that the result is that Indigenous projects have to do 25 times more paperwork for the same dollar as non-Indigenous. This one is from Corporations Canada, has been studying government money, where it goes to Crown corporations, public institutions nationwide. And it's hard for us to see changes in those metrics of funding when Indigenous peoples, this is Indigenous, including Métis, only make up 0.6% of the board seats and 0.4% of senior management in this country. First Nations is even lower than that, which bothers me because us First Nations were the ones targeted by Indian Act and land dispossessions very, very bluntly across the whole country. Accessing money is very, very difficult, like just conventionally going and getting a loan. There's a lot of monies that are available to non-Indigenous people. And I always like to say, hey, it's the kind of money that people think we get and we don't. Like the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act, which is 95% federal guarantee, and the criteria for getting the money locks out First Nations peoples. So when I was talking to nations in the prairies, they were saying, I've talked to multiple nations in the prairies, 100% of the farmers on reserve, it's leased to non-Indigenous farmers who are able to get CALA loans, and the First Nation people themselves on those reserves can't get those loans, those 95% federal guaranteed loans. So Tea Creek, we're land-based, we're Indigenous-led, and I want to talk about this just for a second. I want to define it because we follow a definition that Indigenous-led is majority Indigenous people at every level making the decisions every day. So it's not just Indigenous figurehead or front-loaded or whatever. It's like your board, your executive, your people doing the work are majority Indigenous, and they're the ones making the decisions. So that's what we're doing. And cultural safety is critical for us. So we operate some very strict rules about behavior and conduct on our site, but we allow people to come as you are. So folks can be not clean and sober, for example, which is one of the big frustrations with mainstream programs is they'll say, hey, you got to be clean and sober. And I'm like, what, you're going to exclude a huge portion of our population who really need this. And you can come and be yourself as long as you're behaving in a safe way. And that's our cultural safety metric. This one, I'm just going to hit the play button. This is part of our Tea Creek model, which is that we operate training and teaching across what we call our 4 quadrants. So first, well, in no particular order, because they're all important, is administration and leadership. So who writes the proposals, who does the reporting, who keeps your books, who makes sure your payroll gets done, who's keeping an eye on the details, your builders, so your carpenters, your mechanics to fix things, your plumbers, your machine operators. You need to build a barn, you need to put in irrigation, you need to do these. That should all be coming from our own communities and nations. Growers, like who's stewarding the land, who's fishing, who's hunting, who's farming, who is going and doing the controlled burns. And then the hosts, the nutrition, the cooks, the people keeping things clean, welcoming folks. Like welcoming is a really big skill. It doesn't come naturally necessarily. It's something that was taught and handed down. You saw it. You saw how to host somebody. Like when I was a kid, I saw incredible hosting in our communities, where people would be seated, they'd have a coffee brought to them, they'd be offered something to eat. And a lot of that has been stripped away from us. So we need to relearn how to greet somebody and make them feel welcome. So we actually train in that. We actually run training on how to be a good host. So those are our 4 quadrants. Something we really struggle with is our model is truly holistic. So it's not just health, it's not just wellness, it's not just food, it's not just education, it's not just land stewardship and cultural revitalization and food security. It's all of it together, and it actually we blow results out of the water. So if you just look at health results, our youth are 98% coming in and seeing significant measurable health improvements through our program, 98% in our youth population. So we have and the beautiful thing is we're not saying this is a treatment program and you need to get better. We're actually saying just come join in and just be yourself. And people choose to get better because nobody wants to be unwell. Everybody wants to be well. And so it's just this natural, holistic, people get better. Like I was doing an exit interview with one of our a youth participant, and we don't ask them like, hey, how much do you weigh and how much weight did you lose? We don't do that. We just say, hey, what did you get out of this? How did it go for you? Did you have any health benefits? And I remember she said, oh yeah, I quit drinking. I was like, oh, incredible. Like that's not our criteria. What she chose to quit drinking. She's like, yeah, it's been 3 months. I haven't had a drink. And I was like, oh, cool. And she's like, oh, and I lost this much weight and I stopped, smoking pot. And I was just like, well, good for you. That's really cool. And that's just kind of par for the course with what we're doing. And yet, do we get a single penny of health money? No, we can't get a single penny of health money because we don't fit in the colonial idea of a health program. So all of our health outcomes currently are self-funded. We don't get a single penny of money from any health ministries or health organizations. It's something that is happening and we're delivering those results. 1,200 people, we kind of hit our peak in 2022, 1,200 Indigenous people a year that come to our site. And that includes, and those are in different Indigenous, that's not like 1,200 visits, like people, it's different people, like, preschool, children, adults, elders, dedicated students. It's a busy site. And then we have this growing funding gap where there are metrics and formulas for how much money you should be getting for how many, people in what program. And I didn't actually put this year in because it's really depressing. It fell off a cliff. Our funding fell off a cliff for this year and next year as well. But that gap has just grown. So we got funded we hit our peak of 150 sort of students that we were funded for last year. And we had over 300 enrollments. And this year we're only funded for 25 students. So went way down. So some of the results, lots of graduates. Last year we were able to pulled together funding from multiple sources to pay over 30,000 work experience hours for different First Nations people on our site. 11,000 free meals from April to October. So it was about over 100 meals a day is what we were serving. Everybody you see in this photo, like apprentice professional cook, over 40,000 kilometers driven. So we buy these basically cheap vehicles. Some people would call them res vehicles. And then we hire drivers to go pick people up to make sure they can come here, because over 80% of people who register for services face what we call deal breaking barriers. Transportation is very, very high. Over 60% of people don't have a ride or a way to get around. Mental health supports, again, we self-funded this, meaning we took money from other places and we hired therapists and counselors to come on site, and people could book sessions if they wanted. And then last and certainly not least, we're a real farm that grows a lot of produce on about 3 acres. And we give it all away. So it's all gifted. Same with our seeds. Everything we do is free for Indigenous people. And we operate zero barriers for food. And we get a lot of kickback, I'll just say, like from non-Indigenous people who feel like we're being racist or something like that. It's kind of ridiculous. And then these are some photos I added because this is one of the many things. So I don't know, do you recognize this, Brooke, this potato?
The Peruvian?
Well, it's the Mohawk potato, Mohawk purple.
I thought it was a
It's-
sentinel purple.
Yeah, it's called the purple cowhorn, I think is the settler name for it. Okay, but here's the crazy thing. So you're presenting, and we were gifted this from an elder who's since passed away. We were gifted 3 Indigenous potato varieties. And this elder had saved the potato. It was clinging to life in the corner of his grandmother's root cellar. And so he revived this variety. And then we started farming, and we were the first First Nations family to buy our land back and farm off reserve in recent memory, like since the 60s, since the last First Nations farms were seized and removed. Anyway, so it was a big deal. So his family dropped off these potatoes for us to continue on. They are incredible producers. They're very beautiful. And I reached out back and said, what's the history of the potato? And that's when I learned that he saved this potato from extinction back when he was a young man, and that it was his grandmother, and that it had been received by the Gitxsan. My hair's standing on end. The ancestor bumps are all over my body right now. It'd been received from Mohawk Iroquois people who had come as guests and left them as a gift. So over 150 years ago. Now, I had not been successfully able to track down the type of potato until we had a visitor who saw it and was able to ID it and match the oral history. He said, our community sent people west over 150 years ago, and the oral history is they got as far as what is now Alberta, but we didn't know they made it this far. We didn't know they made it to the West Coast and left the potato. So, and then he said, we've been trying to find this potato. So I sent a bag back with him to your territory, which is really cool. And he said, you know what, you're allowed to call it the Gitxsan potato now. Like, you don't have to keep calling it the Mohawk potato. But isn't that cool? And then so we actually grow about a half a dozen varieties of Indigenous potatoes. This is the Haida potato that we brought back with the help of Tiffany Traverse and her seed stewardship initiative, rematriation of Indigenous seeds. And then on this photo, you can see some of the other Indigenous potatoes. And on the far left is this pink potato that we just call it Gitxsan pink. It's got a similar story as the purple. And we're trying to bring back. We actually sent this to a university who has just got the results back to us, and they said this pink Indigenous potato is #1 in all their trials. Drought resistance, blight resistance, production, like it outproduces all the other varieties. So yeah, this is the big part of what we do as well. It's not it's truly holistic. So I'm just gonna wrap it up right now. I think some of our vision here to share is we're fundraising. We're wanting to rebuild longhouses for our food processing and teaching. We're networking. We want to really drive home Indigenous-led as a standard that should be upheld for funding, like get away from Indigenous ownership and check boxes like, oh yeah, it's a First Nation, but it's all non-Indigenous people doing everything or getting the money. Yeah, we're developing our model to be replicable. So we have over 60 First Nations from across the country that have reached out to Tea Creek and said, yeah, we want to do this. This is what we want. But we have no support from government currently. Like we got zero funding from the province from last fiscal year and this fiscal year, and we've been told not to expect anything from them. So funding's a huge, huge, huge problem. Yeah, so it's one of the memes I saw the other day, and I just really cracked me up because yeah, we are the authentic Indigenous people, and we keep trying to work with colonial institutions who constantly turn their head and like come for the photo op, pat us on the back, and then go and work with I'll say non-Indigenous programs. So last year we learned about 3 million that had been raised in our name without our consent, and like essentially proposal writing, oh, we're going to work with Tea Creek, we're going to do this, that went to non-Indigenous people, institutions, and organizations. We didn't get a penny of it. And that's happening this year as well, which is why on our website you'll see, hey, our name's being used improperly. Click here, call us, email us. If you ever come across someone saying, oh yeah, we're working with Tea Creek, or one we heard from a First Nation is white consultants were telling them, oh, that we had trained them and that we were buying their services, completely 100% false, as a way to try and sell themselves to First Nations using our credibility, you know, to enrich themselves. So and we've been told by government minister that that they would rather they'd rather indigenize non-Indigenous institutions than fund our work, is what we were told. So those are our challenges: lack of funding. So we just are simply advocating for consistent and fair funding. You know, we know how much non-Indigenous institutions get paid to do what we do, and we want that money. We want our fair share of that, and we think everybody who is doing this work, including Brooke, should get and her community should be getting that fair funds. Theft of Indigenous intellectual property is a huge, huge problem. You know, folks see what we're doing as a way to enrich themselves. And if you're Indigenous, please, it's for you. But if you're not Indigenous, what we do is not for you, and it's not to make you richer. It's to make Indigenous and First Nations richer. And then the lack of support for Indigenous-led. So we just constantly have to, you know, we get rejected so much for our funding applications because they're like, okay, we only fund this thin slice over here, and you're doing way more than that, so we can't fund you. You know, so we constantly have to misrepresent ourselves, I'll say, or not be truthful about all that we do, so that a funder will feel comfortable funding us. So thanks so much for listening, and I really look forward to some of the discussion later. So thanks for hearing me out, and really inspired so far.
Thank you, Jacob. Next is Francine Doucet, who joined the Qajuqturvik Community Food Center in June of 2024 as QCFC's co-executive director alongside Joseph Murdoch Flowers. Francine is an Inuk and raised in Iqaluit as an advocate for Inuit. Francine brings experience working for government and nonprofit organizations in areas of public service for Inuit and includes poverty reduction, homelessness, and food security. Go ahead, Francine.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I am born and raised in Iqaluit, as mentioned, and I am half French and half Inuk. Iqaluit translates to a place of many fish. Iqaluit is also the capital of Nunavut with a population of about 8,000 to 9,000 people. Nunavut is in Inuit Nunangat, which means the Inuit homeland, and the word Nunavut means our land. Through millennia, Inuit have sustainably harvested country foods known as Inuksut. Because of colonization and residential schools, access to country food was violently halted, and a system of monetary means to access food was enforced through colonization and residential schools, and also the forced slaughter of our hunting dog teams. I think it was in the 70s that was enforced. Thank you. I forgot about my presentation slides. If it's okay, because I'm having technical difficulties, I'll just try to use the slides and my notes to improvise. Okay.
Perfect. Just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Yeah, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, I'll just give a little bit more context to the importance of country food to Inuit, and then I'll jump into the mission, and you can just keep it there. Thank you very much. Because of the violent halt to access country food, our culture and language, Inuit leaders gathered to fight, gathered to address this, and it resulted in the signing of the largest Aboriginal land claims agreement in Canada, namely the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. So that was in 1993, and it paved the way to give Inuit the rights to hunt and reclaim the rights to our lands, and yes, the right to hunt and the right to access our lands, and to make decisions that put us back in our rights to access our country food in land and air. In Nunavut, there's no road connection. All access is by air. There is a short sea lift season, which allows cargo ships to sail into communities to provide equipment and supplies and dry goods. That's just a bit about the history of Inuit. And so I joined Qajuqturvik Community Food Center. Qajuqturvik means a place to gather around soup or broth in June. And I work as mentioned, I work alongside my co-executive director, Joseph Murdoch Flowers, who joined QCFC back in January 2024. Joey worked with co-executive director at the time, Rachel Blaze, who returned to further her studies this fall. I did have the opportunity to work briefly with Rachel for about a week before she resigned from QCFC. Rachel left the organization in great shape, with much funding and programming set in place for us to successfully steward our work going forward in a reasonable way. And I think Wade Thurhog is on this call. Hi, Wade. Wade was one of the first executive directors of the Soup Kitchen back in 1999, before it evolved to what it is today, known as the Qajuqturvik Community Food Center. So in the 1990s, QCFC was originally a volunteer-run soup kitchen, and through people that really cared and dedicated their hard work and passion, we have evolved to the nonprofit charitable organization that we are today, with many programming and services. So just a shout out to Wade, thank you. In 2020, QCFC joined a National Community Food Centers network through the Community Food Centers Canada, CFCC. Through this partnership, QCFC can serve as a model that other communities in the North and other Indigenous communities can model after as a community food center. And I am at our mission statement now. Thank you. Sorry, it's a little confusing. Our mission is to strengthen health, belonging, food sovereignty, and food access in Iqaluit through food, tradition, and community. We do this through a number of programs that include food skills classes, a weekly produce box, an Inuit women's peer advocacy program that has a food component to it, a daily dine-in takeout meal served 5 days a week, where we are seeing numbers of people accessing food at the center as high as 300 to 550 meals daily. And also another food box program is the Inuliktay Country Food Box program. Inuliktay means what we need to keep going. I'm here to talk to you today about the Inuliktay Country Food Box program and the Country Food Box Toolkit. I was unable to share the Country Food Toolkit using my cell phone data, and I did ask someone to help me share that in the chat today. So I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, but I will certainly email it when I get a chance. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, we can skip that one as well. And I already mentioned that, geographical context. Can you please go to the next one? Okay, I think, okay, I'm in the program section right now. I think we're okay. Thank you, Andy. Country food for us is the food that we want from the land, from the sea, and from the sky across Inuit Nunangat. It is our diet, and it includes marine mammals such as muskox, caribou, seal, narwhal, beluga, bowhead whale, Arctic char, and land mammals such as caribou, Arctic hare, birds such as geese or goose, ptarmigan in their egg, and plants and berries and seaweed. Hunting and sharing country food is the very heart of Inuit culture. Inuit practices around hunting and sharing country food have been affected negatively by laws, policies, and practices with colonization and systemic racism, which to some extent has disconnected Inuit from getting food from the land, sea, and sky. Inuit have the highest rate of food insecurity in the country. The Inuliktay Country Food Box is one way of ensuring Inuit can have access to country food and addressing the food insecurity across Inuit Nunangat. The Country Food Box program stemmed from the Produce Box program that we have, as mentioned. It's new, it's relatively new, started in 2023, but the groundwork started in 2019 when the Qajuqturvik Produce Box was established. Qajuqturvik means food that's grown from the ground, like fruits and vegetables. The Qajuqturvik Produce Box was designed to provide fruits and vegetables across to customers at affordable prices. So customers here, like today, we have the Produce Box happening right now downstairs, and it's a weekly program where people can sign up to receive a box every week, and it's at a pay what you can pricing scale, with the intention of everyone being able to access the Produce Box and Country Food Box regardless of income. So for the Produce Box, we ask for a minimum asking price of $10 And then the full value of the box is up to $91. That includes eggs. So regardless of your income or any kind of means, we ensure that the boxes are accessible. And the success of this produce box inspired the country food box model. And with the support of grants and funding with the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, the Inuit program started in 2022 and has been successful ever since. We have a dedicated country food access coordinator named Doucet, who coordinates receiving, processing, and managing the country food box, as well as assisting in the selling of the box. So in a country food box, typically you'll have 3 to 5 types of different meat. That can be Arctic char, caribou, mattak, which is the whale, the skin and blubber of the whale, whatever type of whale that might be, narwhal, beluga, bowhead. And again, it's pay what you can. So someone can come and buy a country food box for a minimum of $12.50, which is 10% of the full value of the box of $125. Those who pay on the higher end help offset the cost of those who pay on the lower end. And we are able to run this program partly because of partnership with Project Nunavut, which is a social enterprise in Iqaluit that aims to increase country food access across the territory. Project Nunavut has developed a network of hunters across the territory and draws on their connections to supply the country food to us. This network spreads across 2 million square kilometers across the territory, which ensures consistently providing or consistently having access of country food regardless of weather, migration patterns, or ice conditions. We distribute roughly 400 kilograms of country food every 2 weeks, providing boxes of country food to organizations within Iqaluit, as well as directly to individual customers. The benefits of our program are wide-reaching. Customers tell us that they get food boxes and are so happy that they can access food that they want, that's relevant, culturally relevant and nutritious. And they tell us that they feel more connected to their land, their identity, and culture. And some have said that if it were not for the country food boxes or the daily meals with country foods in the menu, they would not otherwise be able to access country food. The foods that are provided in the Inuit program are aligned with the Government of Nunavut's food guide, which also has a country food component to it. The benefits of providing access to country food through our programming goes beyond the customer. Hunters earn an income from hunting, and as we know, with all the prices of inflation these days, the costs for equipment, supplies, and food are really high. Supplies for equipment such as snowmobiles, boats, clothing, fuel, all cost money. It requires knowledge, expertise, endurance, skill, patience, discipline. And these things we consider valuable, and we express that by paying hunters. Hunters tell us when they go out hunting or fishing as part of our program, they also can share food within the community and within their families. Our country food box not only increases country food access in Iqaluit, but also those in communities where hunters work with us. The Inuktitut country food box bridges a gap between the supply of country food from hunters and the demand from customers. Also, customers who access country food through programming here at Qajuqturvik tell us that they are very happy that they see this place as a place that consistently and reliably provides country food. The success of and positive impacts of the Country Food Box program has led to the development and release of the Country Food Box program toolkit that was shared. And thank you for your wonderful comments about the toolkit that I saw there on the chat. This toolkit is designed to be a model for other communities to be able to adapt to their needs if they're interested in starting and running a similar program to increase access to country food. We are also opening a country food. I'm so sorry, I forgot about my presentation. Can you skip to a few more slides? Yes. Yes, I mentioned that. Okay, we can stop there. And oh no, please, can you do the next one? Okay, that's okay. I'll just continue this way. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Another exciting thing that's happening at the Qajuqturvik Community Food Center is that we are opening a country food and bulk store in the coming weeks. The pricing model will be similar to the food box program, so that it will allow a pricing scale that will enable anyone with, regardless of their income status, they will be able to access the bulk store items, such as dry things, such as like flour, sugar, beans, spices, as well as country food, country foods. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I think I mentioned everything I wanted to mention. And then, okay, thank you. I'll talk about our vision going forward is we are aiming to provide more support to hunters and expansion of our programs through salaried hunters, as well as more land programs. And of course, I mentioned the country food and bulk store. Also increasing our political advocacy presence to increase public awareness of our needs and of the needs of our community members. Also, we are beginning to think of having a larger space, as well as maybe owning that space in the future. So we're looking for those opportunities as well. Nako me, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Francine. All right, I guess at this stage, we'll transition to questions. I have a few listed. Oh, give me a second here.
Just while you're finding those, Larry, what I might do is just encourage everybody to, if you do have another question that you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to put it in the chat. And also for everybody who joined today, we are going to put a code at the end of the webinar for our upcoming convening. You will get a discount, so we'll share that at the end when we're all done. Yeah, there it is. But for now, let's maybe ask some questions and feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay, so the first question I have is, with seed storing, how long can a seed be stored?
Is that for anyone? that an open question?
That's a good question. These questions aren't directed. I saw that come up during Brooke's
Oh.
presentation. I mean,
Seeds
yeah.
are pretty viable. Like I said, there was 800-year-old squash that was found in a clay pot in an archaeological dig that was still able to be grown. Yeah, with the proper drying methods and storing, these seeds can last. I've been getting into more like garden, just regular foods, but my passion is with our ancestral heirloom varieties to keep those alive and keep them replenished. And yeah, that's why we keep sharing them to get back into the earth, but they will store pretty well with the proper drying and storing. I heard along my journey that our people used to store in clay pots because, oh, and a smoked leather, because the smell of smoke would deter animals, because in their mind it's fire. So I thought that was pretty cool. So now I have clay pots, I'm working on hides, I'm trying to pull that whole ancestral wisdom together for my seeds.
Awesome. Another factor is the type of seed. A thin seed won't last as long as a thicker seed. I do some of that work as well, Brooke. Love to, if we had lots of time, I would share some stories. Okay, question 2 is for Jacob. Are there more resources going into detail about the chief versus king history?
So generally a good starting point is the Bob Joseph book, 21 Things You Didn't Know About the Indian Act, that I'll just recommend to everybody who wants to do a bit of a deeper dive. Like one of the there's a lot of shocking facts in there, and one that's related specifically to food production is the pass and permit policy under an Indian Act, which forbade Indigenous people from buying tractors, selling, or even giving away food. That policy was on the books until 2014. And up here in our area, and it forbid Indigenous people from having motors in their boats, for example, on the coast. Yeah, so anyway, so in terms of researching the word chief, I found it in that book and other sources. So yeah. And if you also go to any museum and start looking through the old photos, you'll see everybody's called a chief or not a chief, sorry. They're not using the word chief. They're using Lord, Lady, King, Queen to refer to First Nations leaders.
Thank you, Jacob.
Just the repeating the name. I'll put the link down there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, looks like another one for you, Jacob. Someone asked about being able to donate to Tea Creek monthly. Now I know there's been I see communication going back and forth in the chat, but anyway, being able to donate to Tea Creek monthly as opposed to one time. And Jacob clarified that he's looking into that option on the back end for the website. Jacob, did you want to share other ways people can donate for now?
Yeah, so the website's the way to go. One of the challenges and colonial barriers we have is to actually receive donations and give out receipts. You need to be what's called a charity, charitable organization. You have to apply to Canada Revenue. It's very expensive kind of thing to do. So we're in the process. We will be submitting our charitable application before the end of this year. We're trying to cross the T's and dot the I's, which is not fun. In the meantime, you can donate via Farm Folk City Folk on our website. And I actually just emailed them asking if they could add a monthly option to that donation form. So currently you can do a one-time donation. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, there'll be an option to do regular donations for someone who wants to have a recurring one.
Okay. All right, that's it for the list of questions that I was given. But I thought I saw others.
I saw one, Larry, I'm just
Okay.
looking for it, about the cultural safety, I think. I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, it says for the come as you are and welcoming folks that aren't clean and sober, how do you get around that with culturally safe? Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one of the ones that, I'm glad I didn't come from an education background, because we've broken kind of all the rules of education. Because that's one of the things, when I floated it by very experienced, really excellent educators, they're like, no, you people have to be, clean and sober to kind of come to training. But we'd already learned through one of our previous businesses, which was property development. So we'd buy these rundown houses that nobody else wanted, and we'd use entirely local First Nations people to renovate them. And it worked phenomenally well. We always came in under budget, created these beautiful homes. And I learned a lot by doing that, because I learned that most people needed a ride to get there. We'd cook big pots of soup and all sit around it. And I learned that a lot of the folks who had these skills were, struggling with substance abuses or substance addictions. And we have this memory of how, we'd say, okay, well, you can't, do anything dangerous. Like there's liability. You can't get on a ladder or use power tools, but you can be here and you can like carry the roofing tiles on your back and stack them from here to here. We need that done. And then we saw people get better, right? Like with a job and, with a pot of soup and, and sitting around the pot, people would start sharing their stories, and that would be, I think, therapeutic for folks. And it worked really, really well. So, the way to answer the story or the question is, for us, what it became was, you need to be safe. So you can't do anything that's going to risk yourself or anybody around you, but also behaviorally safe. Like, so we came up with these rules, and I won't go through them all now, but they're guidelines that you have to follow to be on our site, that are about, for example, just some really obvious ones, like absolutely no harassment of any kind, no discrimination of any kind, no shaming, like this behavioral conduct that we enforce, regardless of whether you're under the influence or not. And the other thing we found that was really, really, really powerful was that if we said you have to be clean and sober, you're going to exclude all this beauty, like all these survivors who somehow survived horrific, horrific things that a lot of folks in this country can't even fathom or imagine. And for them, drinking alcohol, let's say, is a way that they stay alive. And so if we exclude them from our site, we're excluding all their teachings, all their knowledge. And we had that. We had this one lady who was not able to go to other programs. She came, and she is an alcohol, like always has liquor in her purse. And we just, she could sit by the fire, and she could help us out in the kitchen with certain things. And she had the most incredible trauma, but she's also the most incredibly beautiful person. Like her spirit and her soul, she wouldn't hurt a fly. She would never say a mean word. She always had something positive to say. And if we told her, I just cry to think about not having, like, excluding her from our site. And so what was important to us is that those teachings, including for me, it was our first way we heard about the burnings of First Nations homes here was from her, because she was a survivor. And now there's a book out called Shared Histories. You can look at it, and it's about the destruction of First Nations community in what's now Smithers, British Columbia, the erasure of that community, and it culminated with burning First Nations people out of their homes. The last one was in the 60s. So yeah, so we got to hear some of that history from a survivor who needed to drink alcohol to survive. So so that's how we do it. It's really important to maintain the safety side. So for us, the last thing I'll say is we put and it's, to us, is cultural, is like your word and your honesty is the most important thing. So if people are under the influence, let's say, then it's really critical that they disclose that they be honest. So where people get in really big trouble is if they come on our site and they use substances, or they are under the influence and they don't disclose it. And then they like get on a machine, or they grab a tool, or they, like they endanger themselves and others. That's the kind of situation where we'd be like, okay, you can't ever do that again, or you can't ever come on our site again. Yeah.
Thank you, Jacob. So Kathleen asks, does anyone have any advice for a settler looking to start a regenerative food initiative?
Okay. I don't know if anyone else wants to take that one. I mean, regenerative is regenerative agriculture, yeah, and permaculture is basically fields of food production with indigenous removed. So I would start by saying, like, if you really want to be regenerative, like doing some research about indigenous food and food production in this country, what it was like pre-Indian Act, for example. Because, for example, up here, First Nations, like what's now been branded biochar, like the use of charcoal and soil, is something that First Nations have been doing here for thousands of years, and Indigenous peoples all over North, Central, South America. Like the whole Amazon basin exists because it's a stewarded ecosystem that was intentionally developed by First Nations Indigenous peoples there using biochar, which is indigenous agriculture. And cover cropping is indigenous technology. Seed drilling is indigenous technology, mulching is indigenous technology, and it's all regenerative. So yeah, and then I encourage going beyond that, like, okay, what does whole ecosystem management look like? What does it look like to be good stewards of watersheds? You know, go, like, as we say here, from mountaintop to ocean. Because regenerative agriculture to us isn't just what's happening out in the field, it's what's happening in our whole ecosystem that allows us to have that field. So that's how we do it here. And as a settler, I would just say, like, acknowledging the indigenous roots of regenerative is really, really important to me.
Thank you. So Drew's asking, can Francine speak to any issues they had to overcome with country food spoilage, keeping perishable produce meat before, during boxes are distributed?
Thank you. Thank you, Drew, for the question. The country food box toolkit outlines step by step how to harvest, or when country food is harvested, how to properly package the food and shipping the food from start to finish, which includes mailing instructions and receiving of the country food. There are sometimes, depending on the season, like in the summer, it's a little bit more challenging to send frozen country food or receive country food frozen, because maybe some communities don't have community freezers, but in the cargo there's a freezer. So just being cognizant and following the steps of what we have in our toolkit is really great guidelines on how to ship country food and receive country food. But there are some instances where country food is received spoiled, and that's when our country food access coordinator comes into with his expertise to know what is spoiled and what isn't, and what the state of the food is. So those are very important steps to consider, and taking necessary steps to ensure those foods are not used in programs and services.
Thank you, Francine. Okay. Elizabeth is asking, are any of you involved in getting indigenous country foods into hospitals? Or do you know of any indigenous projects doing that? I'm going to leave it to you guys, but I know of one. Go ahead. So, indigenous country foods into hospitals.
Well, I can just chime in really quickly here. I know one of the challenges that we have here with getting it into hospitals, and this is a colonial jurisdiction issue, is here on the West Coast, hospitals and institutions, you have to go through a colonial food inspection process that's actually not a provincial law, but it's policies that govern institutions. And those are really, really restrictive. So it's hard to get wild harvested or non-conventional industrial foods into public institutions here. It's possible, but it costs a lot of money to get set up and get government certified and inspected. And it's called CAP. Is it called CAP? Maybe someone else remembers the acronym, but it's ridiculous. You have to like weigh your food with like a nuclear precision scale, and you have to get inspected regularly. So it's a bit of a challenge to get it into the institutional side. And much easier if for us if it's non-institutional, non-government controlled. Then there's a huge amount of freedom with food and food safety. And like at our farm, we're actually our food is produced in a much more food safe way than is conventionally accepted. But the regulations add layers of costs that we simply can't afford at this time. So I'll leave it at that. So Larry, maybe if you've got an example of one that actually does it. Yeah.
So Jacob, you nailed it. It's that colonial inspection system. The one hospital that I know managed to jump the hurdle is in Sioux Lookout in northwestern Ontario. And they actually created an exemption to the provincial policy. And so they bring in country foods, meat. They also have there's two main languages in the area. So Ojibwe and Oji Cree, and they have two centers as you walk in. So there's elders that speak those languages, and it's all kinds of cultural accommodations to make Indigenous peoples feel welcome. I'm pretty sure the city is pretty close to 50% Indigenous. So, it's about it's appropriate that they've taken those steps. I know the people involved, actually, I'm related to the woman who got this job done. I'm on my wife's side, so I've got great nephews and nieces that are involved with this. But the whole hospital, the whole relationship to healing, as well as understanding the importance of food sovereignty and culture-based foods is well ingrained in the services that are provided there. It's a good example of what should be.
I can also just jump in and share a resource there. So Nourish is an amazing organization that does just this, is raise money and fund money to have conversations with groups that are trying to put Indigenous foods into the hospitals around their local area in different ways. So I shared the link there. They also have an amazing education. It's a free resource. It's called Food is Our Medicine. And it's a resource that you can share if you are trying to educate anybody in hospitals or anybody in leadership making those decisions about why there is so much value. So I think somebody else also shared that. And one more thing from sort of the West Coast over on our end, a little shout out to amazing dietitian Shelly Crack, who lives on Haida Gwaii, and they are also doing, that's another example similar to the Sioux Lookout of ways that they are getting food into institutions, hospitals, and to childcare that is really like caught, harvested right around the corner and then brought in, but there's so many different hoops that they jump through, literally just to be able to serve it down the road. But it is a really, really good example, and it's very inspiring. So yeah, take a look at Nourish. They're a great organization.
Thank you.
Me to bring some of the squash to our local hospital, where our elders are in their long-term care, and It's a hospital in community, which is led by our community members, and they're very receptive and open to have our food that's locally harvested and grown. So they'll be having some yummy squash soup. I think I have to cut it with a reciprocator though, because it's pretty thick skinned, this squash.
Yeah. Okay, I see a question. I live in the worst state for food access, and I'm working to have tribes in our area network to pool resources together to fix the food access gaps that the state does not fill. Are any provinces in Canada working with tribes to support local ag?
Well, I pulled some data on this, so I'll just really quickly speak to this from the Canadian perspective, like north of this border. Just by the data, we're worse off in Canada than in the United States, on a high level. If you look at the First Nations participation in agriculture and food across the country, it's abysmally low. It's statistically essentially 0%. But if you take that fraction of a percent that First Nations participate in across the country in Canada, and you actually try to dive a little deeper and look at how large are the operations that First Nations are running, and they're micro scale, like we're very, very, very small. And as part of, so that's just by the numbers, the reality. In terms of which provinces are working, I don't know the province by province breakdown of the country, and if any are jumping on this opportunity to work with First Nations. I will tell you, in BC, the answer is absolutely not. I was on an advisory appointed by the previous minister here to shape a new strategy for the province, and I was at it for a year, every single meeting talking about the opportunity to partner and work with First Nations to revive the agriculture economy in this province. And it got to the end of the process, and they released their draft strategy, 60-page strategy, and they didn't mention Indigenous or First Nations or Métis people once in the entire 60-page document. So, I was very upset, and I basically said, hey, I wish you guys just told me you didn't give a crap about us still, and I wouldn't have wasted all that time on that advisory. So yeah, and since they, I put a lot of political pressure on them with First Nations leadership, and we did get added into the strategy as an afterthought, but we're not at the table in terms of decision-making, resources, or real programs in this province, in this country. So. Oh, also one more thing, just really quick. Sorry, I got to throw this out there too. Just a big shout out. Like, we've actually started to get more support from the United States. We got 3 grants this year from American contributors and foundations. So the support from south of the border and globally is growing for what we're doing, but the support within our own country is decreasing. So our funding is about less than 30% from Canadian sources as what it was in the previous year. So we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't still be on our feet this year, actually, if it wasn't for our neighbors to the south of the border.
Okay. Am I missing a question, or does somebody want to type something in? Marissa, do you see anything I'm missing?
No, I see a lot of really amazing resources that folks are sharing, good examples of stuff, but no further questions as of now. Maybe we'll just give one last shout out. If you do have a question, let us know now. I'm not sure, Caitlin, if that's a question or if you're just stating that. Travis, does anyone have a project that is similar to which?
Hmm.
Okay, I'm not sure if anyone know of policy that protects TEK from being extracted?
Well, that raises something for me. And actually, Jacob, you sent potatoes to a university. And I know for us, it's okay, Monoman, but wild rice. And we've had to be careful that Western science wouldn't patent seeds or varieties. And so there's yeah, that's a tricky one. Now, okay. And so I thought that when you sent those potatoes, I just wondered about the ethics of the university you're dealing with. I mean, in most cases it's pretty good, but I've been around long enough to see abuse by academia of our heritage. Um, yeah, it's a tricky one. At the same time, I was thinking about Peru, and on my phone, um, I I have pictures of their food trials that are overseen by Quechua people. In fact, I have a cousin who's a surgeon married to Quechua who's very involved in agriculture. And I forget, I think they have 4,500 varieties of potatoes, and they have these terraces, so they replicate different altitudes. So they're keeping seed stock vibrant and to be able to grow at various microclimate. And then, of course, climate change. And I've been thinking about conversations I've had with people like Rick Hill. Brooke, I don't know if you know Rick from Six Nations. Yeah, and his wife Chandra are very involved in food sovereignty and doing some interesting things around climate change adaptation and saying, we have to gather that knowledge from the past, but we also, I mean, our ancestors were very good at adapting. We better be too, because climate change is unprecedented in the sense of how quickly climates are changing and how severely that will affect our food supply system. And as Indigenous peoples, how do we prepare ourselves for that? I also saw, oh yeah, there was, what was it, the 40th anniversary of an Indigenous conference on climate change that was organized by friends of mine, Tim Johnson. I saw the book, and I actually have one copy kicking around here. So the talk and the adaptation. I don't see a whole lot of enough adaptation. Let me put it this way. Where our action isn't keeping up with the pace of climate change, but the pace of climate change is just it's so severe. It's unless you're on the land, you can't really see the pace. And in my case, I grow old varieties. I actually have grown up both Algonquin varieties and Haudenosaunee varieties, and we work together. Speaking of food sovereignty, yeah. So I've got Henry Lickers coming to hunt with his son. Henry was the first Indigenous Great Lakes Commissioner. Rick comes with one of his kids and others. In fact, we call it the dish with one spoon hunt camp because we're Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee. But we have these conversations. I'm really glad to see your generation doing the work you're doing. It was, to me, moderating today. It was a real pleasure. I'm inspired to see the kind of work you're doing, the kind of thinking, the kind of projects that you have. Jacob, I'm not surprised that you found funding south of the border. We have too, with some of our work. Yeah, it's a strange phenomena that up here with the TRC and all the dialogue that there is around reconciliation, that it's so difficult to find funding sources. It's more than funding or finding funding sources. I see some stuff that's gone down with funding sources and food sovereignty that are just yeah, horrific, really. So I'm glad to hear the conversations today. I think it's important that everyone understands that as beautiful as this knowledge is, it also is wrapped with a colonialism that's still pretty ugly, pretty difficult, and holds good work back. So anyway, I thought the three of you did a great job in sharing the work that you're doing, the complexities, and the ancestral base for that matter. That was awesome. I wonder if there's we got time, Marissa, we got, a little bit of time. Any last words, Brooke, Jacob, Francine, things you'd like to add with a little bit of time we have left?
Yeah, I'll add if anyone is on this call and they're ever have the opportunity to be in a space, use your voice to represent us and speak to any injustice. That's the most powerful thing we have, is our voice, and to be in relation with us, and yeah, honor our knowledge, our work. And I'm super, super inspired today. All the lights are going off. I'm going to be email harassing Jacob and probably Francine, because I really, really inspired. Yamakoa.
Jacob, Francine.
Sure. I just want to respond to some good questions here about how to be a good ally, how to work with Indigenous First Nations, and kind of build on the intellectual cultural property piece that has been touched on. So first of all, I'd say really try and find out the actual history of where you're farming, and know that it's probably the history of has been erased in the last 100 years or so. And that you might be absolutely shocked. Be prepared to be shocked by what you find, like I was, just by doing a bit of a deep dive into the actual history, and know that information can come from settlers as well, and should come from settlers as well as First Nations. So here I was tipped off by a 100-year-old settler, and I asked him his earliest memories, and he said it was fields as far as the eye could see, and none of this forest was here. I thought, what the heck? Well, if you're the first settler, who must have been First Nations that created and maintained those fields. So find that out, and then doing the dive and finding out that actually our whole territory was just covered with First Nations, profitable, wealthy First Nations ranchers and farmers that have now been just gone, right? So finding that out, I think, is really critical. And then there's some really great reconciliation training that you can take. I know Young Agrarians, which is now across Canada, sponsors new farmers to take reconciliation training, allyship training that is good. So non-Indigenous people who work for us, they have to take that training as a starting point. And it's just all about mindset and thinking, and some of those biases and racist thinking that we're not even aware that we hold as just people who live here on Turtle Island now, whether you're Indigenous or not. We've been conditioned to think in a certain way that's unhealthy. So I'd say that. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a really big shout out to one of the, I'm going to drop the link here, or see if yeah, there it is. I'm going to drop the link to this farm here. It's a very small farm, and they're non-Indigenous, and they brought us to tears, with their reconciliation. where they're growing seeds, and they acknowledge that they're doing it on stolen lands, and that a lot of those seeds are indigenous, and they give us the biggest seed donation every year, and they're probably the smallest seed producers we know, and it comes from their heart. And I actually have tried to pay them back, like, hey, we got some funding for seeds, I want to pay you, and they're like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is our reconciliation. We just, and they're just such beautiful people, and that's to me like a pureness of reconciliation. And it's a good example of how to do it right. Lastly, yeah, we initially tried working with universities, and we now have a no at universities post-secondary policy, because the relationships have been 100% purely extractive. They come for our everything and try to profit off it for themselves. I'm actually working on this with one of our institutions that is developing curriculum around us. They send people to us for tours. They send their students to us because their students learn more at our farm than they do in their own classrooms and programs. And the amount of money they've provided to us since year one is $25. So how much value have they got out of us? And I've gone all the way to the top, man. I'm like sending letters because I don't want to say no to all the First Nations people that want to come and benefit, but I'm aware that they're riding on our culture and knowledge and experience, and we're getting nothing. And they run multi-million-dollar surpluses every year. So and that's pretty universal. We've tried working with every institution in British Columbia. And every single time we get to the point where we sign the dotted line, there's usually a paragraph in there that says, hey, your intellectual property will belong to us if you sign this, or, other things like that. So if you're Indigenous and you're looking at working with post-secondary, read the fine print, ask, hey, where is this knowledge going to rest? Who controls it? Because yeah, it's often not healthy. It's not good news. It's often extractive. So I hate to leave it on a downer note, but I know I just wanted to deal with a couple of those questions and things that came up. Also, I will do quick clarification. I actually didn't send the potatoes to the university. I sent them to another grower who I didn't know was working for the university, and he told me afterwards, like, oh, I took it to the university. So I'm grateful that they got back to me with the study results, but I didn't know it was really going to end up there. So I think being conscious of Indigenous seeds and knowledge and where that might end up is critically important. And if you have an Indigenous seed, then you're responsible for what happens to it. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Francine, do you have anything you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
Just to say thank you again for this opportunity, and to echo Brooke's beautiful words of encouragement and raising our voices collectively as Indigenous peoples. It's so beautiful how our food brings us together. That's one common thing I understand, is food brings us together in our communities and our families, and how strong that is and how beautiful that is. So I just want to leave that with everyone, that with our differences and even just geographical differences, our commonality is how we hold bringing our loved ones together and communities together through food. So I just want to leave that with everyone.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank all four of you, Larry, as well. You are also doing amazing work. And even though you were acting mostly as our moderator, we really want to honor that you are a part of this work as well. So thank you. And yeah, I don't think we're leaving it on a sad note or a downer note. I think if anything, it's a very, very important note. There's a quote that from Layla F. Said that says, "The revolution will not be colonized." And I think that that's a very important way to really think about the fact that the work we are doing cannot be done on a colonial timeline, and the stuff that is going to make change and decolonize our work and our practice and the way we live is not going to be through colonized practices. So this is a really, really amazing and beautiful example of how all of you are working towards that revolution and that decolonization. For all of our non-Indigenous and settler allies and folks who are on here, the timing of this webinar is very meaningful and mindful and targeted, because Monday is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which used to be Orange Shirt Day, so it was kind of co-opted as well. So let's note and acknowledge that. And so this is the time, as Jacob said, to look into what is your reconciliation, what is your reconciliation, what are you doing to make a difference? So just a shout out for that. And, you got a couple days to figure that out before, not to say that you shouldn't be doing it all the time, but especially this time of year. And then lastly, thank you again to all of our speakers. And just a reminder that we at FSC will be hosting our convening 2024 towards just and affordable food systems, November 11th to 13th in Tiohtià:ke in Montreal, where we're going to continue to discuss the future of holistic food systems on Turtle Island and different approaches and ways that we can work in this revolution and in a different way. We have put a discount code in the chat for all of you who have attended the webinar today for 15% off of your registration. And then you can the link in the chat is also find out more and register using that code, as well as what's the program, who's going to be there, how are we going to continue this conversation. And if you want to be kept informed of other conversations and stuff that FSC is doing and the work that we're uplifting, around just, healthy, and sustainable food systems, subscribe to our newsletter. You can click on the Get Involved link on our website, and we'll also share that in the chat. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you all being here, and we will send out this recording to everyone who registered, which will also have the discounted code as well. So just because someone left early doesn't mean they don't still get to take advantage of the discount. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and have a fabulous rest of your day.
Yeah.
Well,
Bye.
Just want to say happy hunting, Larry. You get a big, oh, I think he froze.